In those days, in the midst of the world's tribulations of poverty and justice and violence, Bounty got up on Monday morning ready to tackle the Newman community's Living Simply challenge. He wanted to be prepared for Jesus' surprise visit, though he couldn't understand why it had to be a surprise. He was a planner. He didn't like surprises. Those were the November days of doing justice at Newman, and Bounty was inspired by the words of the prophet Daniel that those who lead the many to justice shall be like the stars forever. Bounty was making his plan for how he could be like the stars forever. By the way, Bounty isn't his real name, but he's asked that his name be kept secret for reasons that will become apparent. Father Bounty, decided to Skype Burundi, Border, and Barrio and tell them about the challenge he was going to take in order to help them. "Hi, Burundi," said Bounty. "Hi, Bounty," said Burundi, or she would have said if it were safe to actually go out at night to an internet cafe. Morning at Bounty's was night at Burundi's. "Hi, Border," said Bounty. "Hi, Bounty," said Border. Or he would have said if he had only remembered to bring his computer with him for the desert crossing, and if he had a computer. "Hi, Barrio," said Bounty. "Hi, Bounty," said Barrio. Or she would have if the library hadn't kicked her out of the computer section because she was too loud and scaring the children. "So anyway," said Bounty to Burundi, Border, and Barrio, "we have this great challenge for our month of doing justice at the Newman Center." That's right. To prepare for Jesus' coming, we're doing justice for a whole month. The challenge is to spend less than $1.50 a day on food and drink on 5 days this month, because over 1 billion people in the world live below the extreme poverty line and live on less than that every day. Actually, the meals we're going to pack in January for Stop Hunger Now are only 29 cents each. "Oh, yeah," said Burundi. "We got some of those meals in my village once a few years ago. At least we were supposed to get them. The army took them instead, or maybe they just kind of got lost. That happens here." "Bummer," said Bounty. "Anyway, we'll give the money we save on the Living Simply Challenge to Border Angels, which stops unnecessary deaths of people trying to cross the nearby border through the desert and mountains." "That's great," said Border. "They left water for me when I crossed." "It's not safe for us to cross our borders either," said Burundi. "Actually, it's not safe for us, period." "Kind of like living on the streets of San Diego," Barrio said. Burundi, Border, Barrio, and Bounty agreed to talk again on Saturday, if they were still alive or if Jesus hadn't come by then, to see how the challenge was going for Bounty. Now, Bounty had a lot of food in his cupboards and refrigerator. "I know," he said to himself, "I'll just eat what I have rather than spend money on food. I'll eat for $0 a day." But then maybe that's not quite in the spirit of this challenge, since I'd be eating organic egg whites and other expensive, healthy foods, not to mention brownies and ice cream. So Bounty decided to do some online research and make a list of cheap foods that he could buy at the store. Dry beans and rice, for sure. And there were always ramen noodles, but while eating like a Burundian was one thing, surely nobody expected him to eat like a poor college student. But what about protein? Yes, beans had plenty of protein, but they also had plenty of carbs, and Bounty was used to having a greater carb to protein ratio, or protein to carb ratio, in order to keep his blood sugar level, at least when he wasn't eating brownies and ice cream. Maybe he could find eggs on sale, and he'd actually eat the yolks rather than waste them, even though the cholesterol might push his delicate ice cream-addled system over the edge. At least he'd already had his blood test, which he'd had a couple days ago after that horrible 12-hour-long fast. Well, 10 hours anyway. Surely he wasn't expected to skip his nightly brownie and ice cream. What did his friends Burundi, Border, and Barrio do before their blood tests? Oh, that's right. They probably never had blood tests. Well, I guess I have to hassle with getting in my car and going to the grocery store, Bounty said to himself, if I can decide which grocery store to go to. Maybe I'll go to Ralph's. It's on the expensive side, but they probably have some of those energy-efficient light bulbs I've been meaning to get for the last 10 years. That way, my friends, Burundi, Border, and Barrio, might not have to suffer so much from climate change. He got in the car and realized he was faced with another crisis. Darn, I've got to stop at the gas station on the way, and it's always so hard to decide which of the 20 gas stations along the way to stop at. At the grocery store, Bounty checked out the dry beans. They were even cheaper than he thought, but he really didn't need that many. Maybe he could just buy canned beans. It would be easier. What a hassle and waste of time to soak beans overnight and then bring them to a boil. And canned beans weren't that expensive, really. Yes, canned beans it is. Organic? No, that would be just too lavish. The eggs weren't on sale, and they weren't local, but he decided to get a dozen anyway. That would at least be in the spirit of things, to use expensive whole eggs instead of expensive egg whites. Bounty wondered what kind of eggs Burundi, Border, and Barrio ate, then remembered they would probably eat whatever kind of egg they might be able to get their hands on. Bounty also remembered his turn was coming up to make dinner for his Franciscan brothers. Could he figure out how to make a really cheap dinner for them? But then he couldn't really expect them to do the challenge with him. Besides, they were pretty old. In fact, wondered Bounty, maybe I'm old enough that I shouldn't starve myself like this. Then he realized it was going to be hard to find even one day to eat for less than $1.50 if he was expected to go to community dinners during the week and an unnamed restaurant on Sundays. I know, he thought, maybe if I ate really cheaply for breakfast and lunch, that would be in the spirit of things. And maybe if I didn't eat brownies and ice cream on those days, or I could just eat one other meal besides dinner, then I'd really lose weight and be ready for Thanksgiving, and weight loss was his real incentive. But the idea of just eating one meal a day somehow passed out of his head as quickly as it had come in. While he was at the store, it would be a waste of gas to come again. He bought some food for the community dinner he needed to prepare later in the week. For this purpose, he got some very handy, and perhaps a bit more expensive than they needed to be, already prepared foods. He had momentarily considered not buying them yet in case Jesus came and the world ended. Think of the money he would have saved. Bounty also bought some cookies for Sunday's monthly Burundi Border Barrio gathering. Would it be the last? Bounty drove home and made himself a big breakfast. I'll start the challenge tomorrow, he told himself. Unless Jesus comes first, he thought, half hopefully. The next morning, he forgot to use the real eggs instead of the egg whites, and he had his typical breakfast dessert of a piece of deluxe dark chocolate before realizing what he'd put in his mouth. Darn, he said to himself, the challenge. Well, maybe if I get back into my car and buy some fair trade chocolate that wasn't harvested by kidnapped African slave children, I could still have my 3 doses of chocolate per day. Or maybe I should eat my whole supply of chocolates now in case Jesus comes, or should I have some chocolate on hand to offer him? He started to pack his lunch of canned beans, and, he wasn't sure what he was going to eat with them when he realized he had all kinds of leftovers that his family had sent home with him. If he hadn't been so distressed at having so much food, Bounty would have thought about how lucky he was to have family. Surely it wouldn't be in the spirit of the Living Simply challenge, he thought, to throw away expensive leftovers that he hadn't paid for in order to eat the canned beans he had paid for. Well, he'd put them on his credit card, so he hadn't exactly paid for them yet, and maybe Jesus would come before his credit card bill did. Bounty put the canned beans back in the cupboard, where they would undoubtedly be a welcome sight if this end-of-the-world thing played out over a period of days instead of moments. That night, John Paul, or rather Brother Smith, served a simple dinner to the community. Bounty was fairly abstemious, only having seconds and not thirds, so that he could be in solidarity with his friend Barrio, who was dining in downtown La Jolla at So Others May Eat. The food was good there, and the service was great. Jasmine, Valentine, and the others. But it was only open on Tuesday nights. Bounty was also abstemious at dinner because he wanted to save room for the triple chocolate brownie and ice cream he secretly kept for himself. And so the week went. Bounty didn't do so well with the Living Simply challenge, but at least he felt guilty with every bite of brownie. On Saturday, he Skyped Burundi, Border, and Barrio again. Or he would have if they hadn't been too busy surviving to figure out how to get online. Hi, Burundi, Border, and Barrio, Bounty would have said. Hi, Bounty, Burundi, Border. Hi, Bounty, Burundi, Border, and Barrio would have said in turn. How'd this Living Simple challenge go? Not so well, admitted Bounty. These days of preparing for those days have not gone well at all. It's complicated living poorly. How do you guys do it? How has your week been? With the continued violence here, said Burundi, I'm glad to be alive. I got sent back, said Border, but at least I'm going to see my family for a while before I try again. I ate a full meal on Tuesday and again on Friday, said Barrio. So it was a pretty good week for me. I'd wanted, Bounty replied, for this week to lead the many to justice so that I'd be like the stars forever. But I understand now that while I was failing at living simply, you were doing your best at simply living. I'm starting to wonder if the hope that you all have carried with you through the week is where the light of the stars is shining. Nice thoughts, said Burundi, especially since the lights have been out all week here. But I appreciate you calling. That means something. That is a little bit of light. And I appreciate the effort you made this week, said Border. So it didn't go perfectly, but your heart was in the right place, even if your stomach got in the way of your heart sometimes. Your heart shines bright, even if you can't always see it or don't always follow its light. But you can still give a little money to Border Angels, right? Maybe the amount you didn't save but meant to. And I appreciate your prayers, said Barrio. You did remember to pray this week, didn't you? For us and for God to help you with the challenge and prepare for Jesus' coming. Burundi, Border, and Barrio asked Bounty to give their love and prayers to the rest of the Newman community, then said goodbye for now. And this is the bumbling way Burundi, Border, Barrio, and Bounty accompanied each other in leading the many to justice. May they all be like the stars forever.